All right, good morning, afternoon, evening, and night, wherever you are in the world. And welcome to this DataFlex, what's new 2025 live stream like we did 1 or 2 years ago?
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Well, I certainly hope that you guys also joined our last live stream, which was last week, Thursday, I believe, where we talked with Harm and Jolanda about, well, also DataFlex 25, but also cover the what's new, actually the, what's new for DataFlex in the future, as well as the upbranding. So once again, I am Bram, working at the R&D team at Data Access, and this is...
Well, I'm Robin Haaswinkel. I also did this 2 years ago with Bram. And today we're going to take a look at the what's new, but dive a little bit more deeply in how we can use it and how you can make use of the features yourself.
Right. So once again, some notices here. If you do not have access to the chat right now, it would be best to do a little refresh so that, you can chat with, both us as well. It's very important that you know that you can ask any questions that you might have about DataFlex 25 or anything else. We'll take a look at those questions during this live stream as well. I think that's, at least that's my list for what I needed to say. Yeah. So I guess we're just going to dive in and take a look at the what's new list for 2025.
Yeah. So if you take a look at my screen, I have the DataFlex website here, and if you go to DataFlex-dev, you can visit it yourself. And under DataFlex, there's a What's New page. And here we can see all the new features of DataFlex 2025. If you scroll down a little bit, then all the features are listed here. And I guess we're just going to start with the first one, which is the Navigation Designer. And can you tell me a little bit about the Navigation Designer?
Yeah, so the Navigation Designer we added in 25.0 to make DataFlex a little bit more low-code capable. It's not exactly the term we use, but it's best to explain it. So, of course, DataFlex was already relatively easy. We already had the wizards which you could have used to automate any generation of views or anything like that, or some base templates. But now in 25 we have a Navigation Designer, and that's more of in a diagrammic way, to show what your application looks like, and also the navigations in between these views, so that you can get a little bit of an overview about what your application looks like. And I think the best feature about it is that you now can just drag and drop some almost stable view templates from the palette to this Navigation Designer and just generate some views just based on the columns that you select. So relatively easy, and I guess you can just show that really. That's
no problem. So when we switch to the new DataFlex 2025 Studio, I've made a new project. It's called Navigation Designer, and I've made a new workspace also called Navigation Designer. And in this project, it's just a simple project. Nothing is added really. The only thing that I've done is connect the data from WebAuthn Mobile sample.
Yeah, that's a good thing to mention. So the Navigation Designer is a little start in a longer project. So right now we focused on the, designing your views. We already had the Web App Designer. So this was more of a step of, having one layer on top. But it does still mean that you do need to bring your own database.
Yeah.
So that's something that we still are looking into in the future. So if you missed the last live stream, you can still watch that and see both Harm, me, as well as Jolanda talk about that part, which might be interesting. But let's just jump into the Navigation Designer, I guess.
Yeah. So I'm just going to show that this is a simple web application. I've recompiled it, and when I go to my web browser and I log in, if I can type correctly. I can't type today. I will try again.
All right.
Then you can just see that it is a application with nothing more than just a dashboard and nothing under the tiles. When I now go back to the code and click on this button, you can see I have a Navigation Designer.
Yeah, there are multiple ways to get there as well. Maybe some nice thing to mention, because not everybody can notice the little toolbar icons always. So one is, I believe, using View. So if you go to the View menu, with navigation designer there.
Yeah, at the bottom.
Yeah, yeah. So one way is through there, and also through the workspace start page, so to speak.
Yeah.
There's also a big button there. So 3 ways to get there. Just if you missed it.
Yeah. And as you can see here in the navigation designer, I have already 2 boxes. One says dashboard and one says login. But what if I want to add views now? I'm going to select, I want a select customer view maybe. I will drag it into the view and it will come up with a dialog asking what type of data I want to show. If this has more than, I believe, 10 columns,
Yeah.
it will show this dialog. If it has less, it will just select all. And here I can select maybe I want balance or comments, and I don't want fax number or zip code. And when I press OK, it's just going to add it in the navigation designer. For now, there isn't a navigation, but when I drag from the little plus sign here to my new box that's called OSelect Customer, it's made a navigation from the dashboard to the OSelect Customer view. I also can select what tile I want to press. So tile 2, 3, or 4, it doesn't matter.
Right, you do need to know your object names in this case.
Yeah.
So that's...
And now it's made a relation, so when I recompile, or relation or navigation, when I recompile this and I go back to the web app, and maybe refresh this, when I now click on tile 2, it will redirect me and navigate to the select customer view. And just like that, I've made a navigation in my web application. You can also do this further than one step. So when I want a zoom view, and maybe add comments and balance, and also drag from the select view to the zoom view, I can select again on what object I want to navigate, so maybe on the O list, and recompile. Then when I refresh and I click on one record on the list, it will go to a zoom view and see, and I can see all my data.
Right. And the idea here is that you can almost, without coding, create your application.
Yeah.
So one thing that you also know is if you go to the navigation designer, it's kind of a, like I said, without any coding. So what you can do if you have your database prepared, you can actually go to the navigation designer. You can, just drag on some tables here, create some views for them. And then you can also double click on the views if you try that out.
So double click on dashboard.
Yeah, for example, you can see here, although this is kind of, can you take the other example maybe? Like for example, the ones you generated, like select or something, right?
Oh, select customer.
Right, so here you can generally see the entire web list. And now that I think about it, maybe the zoom is an even better one, so that you can kind of show the, of course the web list isn't really that customizable, whereas this one you can, move things around, you can make them smaller, you can make them bigger. So it's kind of like, just adding it all in one go.
Yeah.
And of course, if you're missing some items, you can generally go to the DDO Explorer and drag some additional items from there as well.
Yeah. And as you can see, it will just generate the code on the background when I don't go into the designer. All right. And what if I have a already existing application? Can I then also module my whole application then, or what's the deal with that?
Yeah, so the way that you can do that is the way the navigation designer works is using the web register path. So in 19.1, I believe, though I'm not entirely sure, we added the drill down concept. And the way that this worked was using web register path, where you would define your navigation from when I click on this button and do a set navigate path, then we'll go to that view. Now, the navigation designer actually parses those web register paths, and as such, it knows which views and which objects even go from one page to another.
Yeah.
So if you have a big application which already uses the web register path, it will automatically parse those, and those should work in here as well. And you can, of course, create new pages in there as well and all these kinds of things. So, but it is quite of a requirement that you have the drill down paradigm here and not the view style, I would call it, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Shall we dive into the next topic?
Yeah, before we do that, maybe a little last thing here. And that's if you go to the options here.
The preferences, you mean?
Yes.
Yes.
You can see here that on a workspace level, you can actually change the style that you might want. So if you do not like the annotations that we use for Zoom or anything like that, we had some comments about it in the forums during the alpha and the beta. So you can actually completely change here how you want your files and the object names generated. So that's entirely up to you. And you can even specify whether you want the grid layout by default or the floating layout. So that's entirely up to you here.
All right, sounds amazing.
Yes.
Let's go back to the What's New page. The second feature in the What's New page is something about dashboards, and the third option is something about composite classes. Can you tell me a little bit about composite classes?
Yeah, so the big thing about the composite is that it's actually quite something that's, well, very related to DataFlex, right? So in DataFlex, we have the object nesting to define your views. But sometimes it was also very, quite nice to have it more like a template or something like that. If you take, for example, dynamic objects, which I think you'll show later, there was this thing where you also always had to create these dynamic objects and then manually nest them, or create the nested ones dynamically as well, which is kind of a hassle almost. The idea was with the composite that you wouldn't have to nest all these things. So if you're writing, for example, a web card shopping kind of application and you want to have those little buy tiles almost with the picture and some title there, the way that you can do this with the composite is that you can just design those, create a composite based on a web group or anything like that, nest a image object in there, nest a button there, nest a label there, and you can just instantiate that composite multiple times, whereas having to instantiate those for every single one. But I think the best way is just to show it, I guess.
Yeah, I will. Let's go back to DataFlex 2025. Here I have the web order mobile example workspace, and just to show you that it's running, I will go to the application and log in with the default login. I can't really type today.
Maybe I'll handle some questions. I see we have at least one. Is there a scenario where you wouldn't use the navigation designer, and if so, why? Yeah, I think that it's very funny. Using the navigation designer generally just cleans up a whole lot of time. I don't know if I actually said this during the previous live stream as well. If so, I'm just repeating myself here. Harm actually had to do a training during Scandic last year, which he prepared for like a whole day. Back then we just had the wizards. You could just do a training on that the whole day. Whereas now with the navigation designer, he shortened that already to half a day. It was like done in half an hour purely by dragging the views around, doing the navigation, and it was done. So it's just generally a huge time saver, really. So the only reason why you wouldn't use the navigation designer if you don't have the drill down pattern. But yeah, I think that most modern DataFlex applications do have this since 19.1. So I see we also have another question here. How much of the navigation designer behavior can be customized? Yeah, so I think that we showed this already. So there is a little preferences panel. Maybe you can show that once again, just to
go back.
Make sure we answer that one. So at the very top of the navigation designer, we have this preferences panel, and here you can generally customize any behavior that we have provided settings for. So that's both naming as well as grid layouts. And are there any others? I'll admit it's a bit hard for me.
Yeah, and you can select show header for select views and do not remove web register path reference when deleting a view, all that kinds of stuff.
Yeah. So generally, we have at least tried to provide you with as much customizability there as you can have. So let's get back to the composites.
Yes. Again, I've opened the web order mobile example here in DataFlex 2025. And the only thing that I've done here is made a extra view, and it's called demo view. And in this view, I have a dynamic object which loads the web list and which loads the columns and fills it. And when we take a look at the code here,
yes, that's the case that I described.
Yeah, it's just a. Let's first go to the view. it's just a dynamic web container, and in the onload we create a web list, which is a special kind of class that we've made just to load the data, and then we initialize some properties, and then we make 2 columns, just for the web
them as
list.
the childs, right?
Yeah.
So like you would do normally with the object notation, right?
This is just default dynamic object behavior, and in that special class, we have an on manual load data, and here we essentially load the data by doing a find and then setting all the things in the 80 rows, but manual loaded stuff. And this works, but it is kind of a lot of extra work that the composite just can make easier for you, right?
Yeah, right. So it's actually very, or at least the composite can make it a lot easier. So like I say, using the web list is just one example where you would have child objects, as we would call them. So in this case, those are the web columns. But like I said, this pattern would apply for shopping carts or anything like that as well. But let's maybe just give it a go and try to change it to the composite so that we can at least get rid of those dynamically created web columns.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, guys, we're back.
Yeah.
We seem to have had some technical difficulties, so we'll just skip that part. So normally you would actually be able to, like we said, so we got rid of the get dynamic create object and just be able to nest those web columns in there instead. So that's really the only part there. So since that doesn't currently work, let's just go along with the composite. So what we're going to do is, what we kind of wanted to show you here, is that using the composite gets a little bit easier with the nesting, allowing you to have a little bit more clean code when it comes to generating or creating dynamic objects on the fly. So now we're going to the next step, and that's of course dashboards. Now, as you might have noticed, the dashboard looks a little bit different in 25.0 when you go to web or the mobile at the very least. So let's try to show that here. Right, so we have that here. You can see that it's kind of revamped. And all these little white panels or groups, or from whatever perspective you might be looking at those are actually C-Web widgets or instances of widgets. And now in 25, it's actually possible to create those yourself as a developer, but it's also possible to customize this dashboard if the developer permits so, to have the end user actually move things around. If he wants to resize some widgets or anything like that, he's able to do that. So generally you can pretty much do anything here now.
Yeah, you can customize your own dashboard basically.
Right.
Yeah.
And the way that this works, so this is all locally stored. We did this before with the C web list. Right. So we did this previously with the C web list, where we used the local storage of the web browser to actually store the settings. And now we actually did that with the dashboard as well. So that means that all settings will be locally available on your device, and you as developer have the option to actually interfere with this if you want to have any user-specific settings, which you then can also store in a database or anything like that. So what we would like to do is now, of course, use the composite to create somewhat of a new widget. So I guess we're just going to go with the salesperson web list in this case.
Yeah.
So let's try that out. So here in the code, I guess you're going to take over. But
yeah. So I've made a composite here with nothing in it, but it inherits from C-Web widget. And in here, we can just treat it as a normal view or anything like it. So what I would want here is a data dictionary of salespersons. And that data dictionary is then giving the data to a web list and showing the data. So what I'm going to do here is I'm opening the DDO Explorer and I'm going to add the salesperson's data dictionary, which is done for me. And then I want to add a web list, and that I can do via the class palette. So when I go to the class palette and search on the web list and grids, here I have a web list and I just want to clear it for now for easy access. And then I can choose again from the DDO Explorer here the columns that I would want from the salesperson data dictionary.
Right.
So I would want the ID and the name, and I can drag that just in the web list and it adds them for me.
Right.
Just clearing up some white space. And just let's set pb fill height to true.
And then we also need to fill the way, or give it a little kick.
And normally we'll do that in an onload, but when we look at a other widget, for example, it has a special function at the bottom, on initialize widget, that also runs for us and that we can use. So I will just copy that and just change the object name to OWebList1.
Right.
And there are some other things that need to be set in the web widget itself. So we're just going to copy, and I will explain in a minute.
Let's steal it.
What it does. Here. And basically it says some data, and we need to change the names of those properties so that we don't get a naming collision when the widgets are added. So let's call this C widget sales person, and the caption is sales person.
Right, and from the top of my head, the caption is used in the widget palette. I think we'll see in a minute, and then the widget name is purely for internal storage. So the end user won't see that one.
Yeah. So now we have made the widget, but we haven't added it to the dashboard. So
right.
How do we do that?
Right, so if we go to the dashboard, you can see here at the very top, so we have this little widget container over here, and then we also have the register widgets procedure event that we need to abstract. Yeah. So by default, if you do take it from the class palette, it will also automatically provide you with that procedure, so you don't need to look around for that one. But the way it works, you can just generally register any C-Web widget compatible class here. So the only thing that you need to do is just include that file with the composite that you created.
I will do that.
And then send a register widget with the ref class.
C salesperson's widget. And then I will recompile again.
All right.
And when I go to the view and I refresh, did I type everything correctly? The demo view is still
but that's
doing
because
its magic.
Yes.
When we now go back, it should work.
All right.
And then when we go and do this edit button, and we can see that we have a new web widget, and it's called salesperson with the description list of salespersons, and we can drag and drop that like a normal widget in a dashboard, and we have a new dashboard widget.
Yeah, quite easy, I would say. So one thing of note here is that the widget palette, it has a built-in widget palette, but you can also customize that completely. You can also see that in the web or the mobile example, and you generally just have the possibility to change that however you want, how it looks and anything like that. So one thing of note here, if you can go to the code of the widget itself again for a minute.
Okay. Yeah.
So like we previously started to say, at least, is that dynamic objects still aren't DDO capable, which has to do with the underlying technology here, but the C web widgets are. And the way to think about this is that a C web widget is really just like a view. So one thing that you can also do here is you can also press F7 or toggle the web designer. You can also just design your widgets visually here as well. So it really is almost like a miniaturized view or anything like that.
Yeah.
And as such, you can put anything that you might want in here. So any control, you can put in some graphs here or anything like that. So that's all very much possible here.
Yeah. So you can handle it like a view, but it's just a composite class.
Right. And so you can just nest your data dictionaries in here. You can set some servers and anything like that, and it will just work.
Oh, that's nice.
Yes.
Shall we go to the next point on what's new?
Yes, maybe some last thing about this one, and that you can also provide a default dashboard here. So if you go to the C widget container, you can see that we already have some nested web widgets in here.
Yeah.
And the way that this works is that a startup is actually going to find those objects and make that as a sort of kind of default view. So if you, for example, wanted your widget in here as well, then you just create an instance of that object. Yeah, that should pretty much just work out of the box when the widget goes to the client, and then they are provided or presented with this new widget as well.
So when I make object in the dashboard,
that one becomes part of the default actually.
Oh no. So let's try that.
Right.
Let's first remove the widget.
Sure.
Because otherwise we can't see
Mm-hmm.
the default changes. And I can just say, for example, at the bottom here, I can just make an object. How did I call it? Salesperson's widget. Do I need to do anything else than just make the object here?
Well, you do have to provide a size, so anything like that. So you generally provide just the general position and styling that you might want.
Let's just copy that over from a other object.
Yeah, I believe the designer should also show them, but I'm not entirely sure about that one. Yeah, it does try it, but I can see it's not entirely capable of it. All right. I guess we can just try this out.
Yeah. So recompile this.
Might be that we still need to clear our cache here.
I can do that by pressing Shift
Yeah.
F5.
Yeah, but it has to do with your cookie. So maybe you can show that as well. Kind of logical in this case. So
if you want to clear your cache, you can just go to your DevTools, disable cache. And
yeah, but in this case we have the application. So if we go to our local storage, like I said, we have the general settings of the widget are actually stored locally. You can see those over there, if I believe correctly.
These are the cookies of
Yeah, and if you go to local storage.
Local storage, yeah.
Right. So you can see both the configuration of the web list as well as the widget container, if I'm correct. So the general ways you can delete these. There's also a version property, so you can also do it like that, if I believe correctly. Maybe just clear all. And now if you were to refresh, it should. Yeah, so there it is.
It's on top of the one, but
Yeah, I believe that the widget container also has a version property. I'm not entirely sure about that. So the general way to do that is increment that version property. And then the client will actually get a little refresh. Oh, there's a newer version of the default dashboard, and as such, they will be shown with that one instead. But you'll generally find it in the doc as well. All right.
Always nice those cache things.
I don't see any questions right now. Then I guess we're just going to go to the next topic, I suppose.
Yeah. So let's go to the What's New page again and go to the next significant point. And that's boost your security with standard password hashing out of the box.
Right.
What does that mean?
Well, so one of the biggest things or bigger things that we did, or actually kind of late actually, but in the process. But so one of the things that with 25.0 we started to look more into the security by default. So DataFlex has provided many security tools over the years. So we had like 2auth, OAuth libraries, all these kinds of different tools that you could use as a security library. With pretty much all the tools you needed to build a secure application. But of course, now with the almost low code vibe, not everybody might have the same understanding about, cryptography and all this kinds of difficult stuff. That's completely reasonable because it is difficult. And more importantly, it's also very difficult to maintain. And that's why in 25 we decided to give you at least a default password hasher. So that means that if you use the C Web Session Manager standard, which all default projects do, those will actually use this new C password hasher and give you a general concept of security. Of course, this might still differ based on the sector that you're in. So if you're in healthcare or anything like that, surely you might need
better.
There are many different forms, and there's also some guidelines on this depending on your country or anything like that. But this password or the default hash is I think you have to look it up because it's a very long acronym. So if you go to the C,
Well, I have to
do you have it in
see
front.
you see session manager standard, and then
Right. So if you scroll a bit down, you'll see the C password hasher. A bit to the top.
I have a package here, the C password hasher
Sure,
package.
sure. Go there, I guess. And all the way at the bottom right there. So you see the algorithm there. It's a long name. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. But generally, this algorithm is generally encouraged by NIST, not necessarily in the password context, but those are encouragements from both NIST as well as some others. And as such, that generally should help you to accommodate for, health sectors and these kinds of things by default, and should secure your application as well by default instead of still having to do it yourself using the security library or anything like that. Now, if by default people will have their own session managers, that's still fine. So if you're already using the security library or anything like that with Argon 2 or anything like that, you're still fine to keep using that. So it's not necessarily a reason to migrate to this or anything like that. It's just a general way to provide some default security. And also a good one, by the way. It's not like, yeah. Right. It also has auto migrating. So if in the future data access chooses to upgrade its security for a different algorithm or anything like that, that's all done out of the box. So if you do migrate to this one or do use this one in a new project, then you don't generally have to care about it anymore because it's all done out of the box, really. So that's kind of a nice feature. And you can also see that if you go to the user login in this case, for those that are the more technical guys watching, might be a little interesting. User login, I believe it's called.
I will just go to the code explorer.
And might be the easiest way.
Yeah.
Right, and if you scroll a little bit down, you can see the verify password. And you can see that actually returns a B upgrade. Yeah. So in this case, it's a little BIREF value, which actually returns. So if you logged in using a version 1 algorithm, for example, so that would be this one in practice. So if data access choose to upgrade the algorithm, or you might even for that case, because developers can also customize this as well.
Yeah.
That would actually provide them with a way of telling, okay, so when the user logs in, it might be that they still need to upgrade their hash. And as is when that is returned through, you can see that it's rehashes the password using the latest algorithm, and then it will do a resave. So that's all done out of the box, and that's very logical because, of course, we don't really know what the password of the user was, so we can do that up front. So we're kind of depending here on the user logging in. So when you actually do upgrade your password algorithm, you kind of have to let your users know, hey, please log in so that we can update your security or anything like that. So that's yes.
It's just password hashing made simple.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
That's nice. Are there any questions?
I don't have any right now. They're a bit shy.
Oh. Shall we go to the next point on the what's new?
Yes, I guess so.
So the next point on the what's new is the CSS variables. And the CSS variables, I think, are very great, but can you tell me a little bit about them?
So of course the guys that, if you already use the DataFlex styler, then was of course already practically simple, maybe show that. Yeah. So DataFlex already had this DataFlex styler, which you could just, choose some colors for your theme that you might want or anything like that. Now he needs to log in on screen. But so the DataFlex styler was really a way to, design your application with any colors or anything like you might want.
I can type. Yeah, go on.
You're distracting me at this point. But of course, if you do want to do it the hard way, then you would have to go to these CSS themes, and you would literally have to look at all these color values with the hashtag hex values, which is really distracting. And you would also have to, walk around or change all these values individually, which was very distracting. But now with the CSS variables, we actually changed this so that we only have quite a persistent pattern almost to the naming, and now you only have to change them in one place. So a much easier way to change the colors in your entire scheme, which kind of makes the DataFlex styler a whole lot easier if we had to implement this now for 25.0. That's Yeah, so maybe if you can show something about it, would be nice.
Yeah, so I've opened a Visual Studio Code application, and here I have opened the web or the mobile example again of 2025. And then I can see that I have in the theme.css, I have, a few colors of main, but a lot more grayscale. But the colors are
the primary coloring is always at the top, right?
yeah. And when we now want to change the color, we go to the application.css because that is where you would change your CSS for your application. And I have prepared some nice colors.
Right, so the way that this works, though I wasn't the one that implemented it, but the way that this works is that actually the very last one, so in the index.html, the application.css is actually included last, and that means that one generally has a priority over the others.
Yeah.
So the only thing remember, you just have to provide the root attribute here, provide the variables, and then everything will change on the fly.
Yeah, because it will override the already existing color.
So no more customizing the entire theme to your own private party. That's which would make migration in the long run a little bit nicer to do. Though I can imagine it's quite the struggle if you have to do this right now. But
I have the web or mobile example again open in my web browser, and now I can just simply press Shift and F5 because then it clears the cache.
And now it's orange.
And now it's orange. The whole application
the DataFlex colors
just changed color. So these variables are very powerful and easier to maintain than it was in the earlier versions.
Yeah,
because it would stand everywhere.
Now there are some themes, I believe. Maybe you can look through the different themes, but there are a couple that have a little bit more customization than others. And I mean, that's fine because not all themes are the same, but they do have the same naming scheme. So even if you wanted to switch on runtime or anything to a different theme or anything like that, you can generally just keep the same coloring scheme or anything like that if you wanted to do that.
I can see some have more than others.
Yeah, but generally a very nice feature to, speed things up. And especially, of course, if you have to start a new web application or something, this is just really powerful.
Yeah, it's nice. Shall we go, or do you have any questions?
I do have one question. So what is the earliest version of the DataFlex web app that you can automatically update to 2025 from? And that's actually a very funny one. So what I can remember is that 19.1, there was this big migration for the history management. That was quite a big thing to migrate from, as far as I can remember. But of course, generally the thing here is that 20.0, where we added the Unicode and 64-bit support, I think that's the biggest hurdle to get over with. Of course, there's the only real thing there is that if you go from 19.1 to 20, the only real requirement that you have is the Unicode support. Of course, running a web app in 32-bit is perfectly fine. There's not really any specific reason where you would have the 64-bit application, but it's mainly if you use some external components that would actually require the 64-bit. So if you go from 19.1 to 20, there's generally only doing the Unicode part, and then the 64-bit you can do whenever you want. And then from then on, as far as I can remember, it should generally just be changing the workspace for version 2025 or use the migration wizard, and it should pretty much work out of the box as far as I know. Of course, there might be some security things. That is something. In 20.0, we also added some additional security measures for the web application framework, so it might not always be completely so, but besides some minor things, I think it should be generally possible to just go in one time. That's
all right.
I also see we have another question here. Can you change web app entry field colors dynamically without having calls back to the server for every field that the user leaves and enters? I'm going to have to read that one again. Can you change web app entry field colors dynamically without having calls back to the server for every field that the user leaves and enters? That's a very good question. So currently, in the current paradigm, as I would call it, you are still required to either use the CSS, what's it called?
Variable.
CSS class, PS CSS class, to actually change those CSS themes. That's generally just the way it works right now. For the one that asked the question, it's highly recommended to take a look at the previous live stream where we talked a lot about tech stack, where everything is going to work just in your web browser, and there it would practically be instantly as opposed to first going to the server. So though we don't have it right now, as far as I can remember, it will become possible in the future. So that's something to look forward to. And like I said, do take a look at the previous live stream as well, where, well, pretty much we talk about it a lot. So,
no further questions?
No, not right now. Do you have anything more for the CSS variables?
Yeah, we also have the JavaScript or the ECMAScript.
Right. Yeah.
Changes.
So not only did we do the CSS variable upgrade, we actually also took a look at the JavaScript side of DataFlex.
Yeah. So to show that, I have this is the 25 example. So I have opened the web form here, and then I have another Visual Studio Code application open with the 24 JavaScript classes. And the biggest thing that you can see here is that in the 24 you can't go to any hierarchy, but when I go to the 25, it now extends from web base form, and I can go through the whole inherit hierarchy and go up it. Can you explain a little bit how this works?
Well, that's actually quite funny, since the chat is telling war stories. I think I might as well. So when I came here, which isn't even that long ago, we actually still had the Internet Explorer compatibility, because generally in Brazil, the United States, Internet Explorer 11 was still used a lot. And of course, Internet Explorer compatibility was already kind of degrading because Chrome kind of took over the years. But the general thing is that, of course, Internet Explorer classes were a lot harder. And also, the older you get, of course, the ECMAScript wasn't really supported until 2015 or anything like that. And Internet Explorer 11 officially came with Windows 8, though I'm not entirely sure about that one. So from top of my head, it might not even have supported classes at all. So the thing that we had to do in DataFlex, we kind of, or at least Harm, back in the day, just created this kind of mimicking design of how you would design an object or a class in DataFlex, ported it over to JavaScript in its own little framework. That's also part of the reason why we call it the web app framework, I guess. But that actually enabled us to use classes, or mostly what you would consider classes, in the JavaScript side. Now, of course, that kind of ported over the years, and of course we still had the Internet Explorer compatibility, so it was also still needed. But I don't know how long ago, maybe 2 years ago, where we dropped the Internet Explorer support, and that kind of gave us the freedom to try some new things as well. So things like Webpack, those kinds of things, we already started with in 20.1, I believe. Of course, the developers didn't really notice anything about that. But now we actually made it a lot easier by using the actual ECMAScript classes. So those are classes that JavaScript as a language provides by itself, which you can see also on the screen right now. And that makes it generally just a whole lot easier to use something like Visual Studio Code or any other IDE by, having go-to clicks, actually seeing your properties light up and those kinds of things, because of course we didn't have that back then. So generally there's not a lot to change. So if, as a developer, you already provided custom controls or anything like that from our Learning Center course, which we'll need to update, of course, as well. But those are actually backwards compatible. So if you still use the old notation, those will still work. You will get a warning for deprecation notice of, hey, you're using an old style, but they will still work the same way that they did. And of course, it was already possible to use classes as a custom control. So if you used a newer technique, then this is exactly what what is looking right now.
Yeah.
But generally you can convert any custom JavaScript class within 5 minutes or anything like that. It's just a find replace kind of thing, and you're done. That's
And are there any limitations in just, can everybody just upgrade to the new classes, or are there any setbacks, any negative features?
not really that I can think of. Of course, it is a styling difference. I myself didn't really bother with the older style, but I don't think there are currently any setbacks that might impact. So like I said, we really try to make it backwards compatible, so everything should
Everything
still
just
work there without a bother.
That's still nice.
And over time, the developers can just roll out slowly. So that's entirely up to them, really.
All right. Do we have anything more on JavaScript or CSS side?
I don't have any questions. Let me take a quick look. I guess we can just go to some last additional features of 25.0.
Yeah.
One of which is the regex class.
Yeah.
Which I won't expect Robin to just type out of his head some very large regex expressions. But in web order, there's actually a nice example.
So I have
an advanced one as well.
I have the web order example open.
Mm-hmm.
On the regex
actually on the page.
On the page, I've prepared something.
Yeah.
But here you can see a rather large, and I don't know what it all means, but a rather large regular expression that you can execute over a test string. And when I press execute, it found 45 matches.
Yeah. Yeah, so by default, up until now, I think we discussed this last week as well. Developers actually were using this COM control from Visual Basic or anything like that, Visual Basic 6 or anything like that.
Oh.
Which of course probably worked fine, but we just wanted to provide our developers with a little bit more flair. And that's why in 25 we added the regex, which also is really, it is kind of a funny story that this class was actually one where we first implemented it in the technology stack project. So in the new runtime, we already provided this class, and this was actually one of the first classes which we backported from the technology stack to the classic runtime.
Yeah.
To also, keep our developers which don't have the technology stack yet. Well, none of them do, but to provide them with the fun as well.
Yeah.
So that's why we created this new class. You can just do pretty much anything that's imaginable. You can find values, substitute them, pretty much anything regex-esque. And this also uses the latest library from PCRE2. And this is generally, so regex stems from the Perl days where it was a library. I've never coded Perl myself, but that's where it came from. And to keep up with the original, so there are some different implementations. JavaScript uses a slightly different implementation, I believe. But since PCRE is kind of the standard, quote unquote, as far as their standards are, we chose for that one. So anything that you can do there, if you go to regex 101, maybe go there as well.
Just type
regex 101. Yeah, you can find it by Google or anything like that. Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
You can also see here at the top left, you can also see that's also pre-selected. It's kind of this thing where we're like, okay, this seems to be the standard, and which works nice. So if people can type it here, then you can also use the DataFlex as well. So that's kind of a nice thing that if you want to test your regular expressions beforehand, you can actually do that here, and they will also work in DataFlex then.
That's nice.
Yeah. And what I think Harm did it in the web order. So if you go to the web order page again, what he just did was little textual parser really for if you can find it.
Yeah, too many tabs.
Was a little parser for JSON. So here you can actually see we got some full matches. So the full matches, the way regex work is you have the actual the match in total, and you can also have some groupings inside, so some kind of value type of system.
Yeah.
You can also see that over here where we have some value and a key. So those are actually by group the values that it found out. Yeah, so you can pretty much do anything that you want with regular expressions in DataFlex now, and it's just a nice tool which works on Windows as well as web. Yeah, so pretty much the freedom that developers might want.
Yeah, it's nice for validation.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have any questions?
No. No. No, I'm lying. So we have one question here. The chart library shown at Scanduck. Can we see it again? When is it ready for release? At Scanduck. Now I do wonder who it is. Good at these alert here. Right. Well, since we might be on the subject, what we want to do at DataX is do a little bit more open sourcing of some libraries that we can. One of the candidates of which is the charting library, which we have been working on for a while. So we had some developers in the community which very graciously already provide some charting library example for Charge.js or what's the other one? Syncfusion. Yeah, so there are some libraries floating around. But the thing is that they're generally all different implementations, and it's also very hard, which I also presented at Scanduck, is that all these different charting libraries all have different support for different charts and things that they can do and cannot do. Yeah. And what the charting library that we had shown at Scanduck, we don't have it here, I think.
No, I don't think so.
But one of the things I showed is that with one interface, so you really have only one class, and then you can switch the run or the backend at runtime. So if you want to use Syncfusion for a specific library, you could just use the same interface. You only have to say, I want to use Syncfusion JavaScript library, and you're pretty much done. So we're working on that more final testing phase. So the design phase is done. We're having some final tests there. We're not entirely sure how we're going to release it, just through the download center or also on GitHub. So like I said, you can also go to the GitHub page, maybe show that as well since we're on the topic.
I can do it. I've prepared that one as well.
Of course you did. Right, so on github.com/dataaccess worldwide, you can see 3 libraries now.
Yeah.
So when we took over the unit, of course, that one became available as well immediately. And now since Scanduck, we also have 2 new libraries. So one is the file type library, where you can check the MIME type of a file, which you might have uploaded to a server or anything like that. We have the JSON Web Token one, and hopefully soon the chart library will also be in here for you to, contribute to us as well with the features that you might want, as well as to provide it to developers. So that they can use it as well. And that's really a very nice thing for dashboards, especially because, of course, the nicest dashboards generally have charts in them. So
I agree. Yeah, and the GitHub is just basically to make it more public.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Do we have any more questions? I don't think so.
No. Do we have anything more to say?
No, I think we can wrap up if there are any other questions. So your last chance.
Yeah.
So any questions that you might still have, you can leave in the comments. They will also be answered on the website. So we did that for the last live stream as well. Any questions that got left around, you can find them on the new DataFlex.dev website. So you can still find us there. Of course, forums and such will also get answered if you ask your questions there. There's some last notices here. One is that we're doing roadshows. They're not really roadshows, they're virtual roadshows.
Unfortunately.
But there's a way to, so of course we had some nice conference over the years, though they're generally English. And that means that, generally you have to come to Europe or to Australia or America for those kinds of things. Excuse me, people looking at me speaking your mic. But and these roadshows are a way to provide the presentations that we did on those conference also in the native tongues of those. So for Brazil, those kinds of places, we actually have some very AI generated material where I'm speaking Portuguese. So I can't speak Portuguese, but surely that will look nice. 6th and 7th of May, we're doing dashboards. So
Yeah.
we have roadshows for dashboard. So those 2 days, you can find it all on the website, by the way. And then the 21st and the 22nd May, we're actually doing a technology stack roadshow to show that concept as well. So like I said, any questions, you will be able to find them back on the website, or any questions that you might ask afterwards.
Yeah.
And of course, do not forget to go to the DataFlex.dev websites, of course. So of course you're seeing that as well now on YouTube, where we actually named DataFlex-dev as well now. So I guess that's it.
Yeah.
That's a wrap.
Thank you for watching.
Yeah. And see you next time.
Hope to see you on the
as we would
roadshows.
say. Yeah.